We had a grocer in Cameron years ago called March, Joe March. And one Christmas, or just as the new year was coming in, you see, the travellers came round for their orders. First man came in and he said, "Mr. March, I'm very sorry, but the price of tea and coffee and drink and chocolates are all going up on the 1st of April. Oh, he said, I'm very sad to hear that. Bit later on in the day, another man came in. He said, "Mr. March, I have to inform you that flour and cereals are all going up on the 1st of April. Well, he said, I'm sorry to hear that, because I've got a job now competing with the supermarkets." And then the next day, another traveller came in. He said, "Mr. March, on the 1st of April, the price of all tinned goods is going up." Mr. March said, "Well, I'm sorry to hear that." And the next day he put a notice in his shop window, "The 1st of April will be the end of March." When I was downtown last week about my coat, I noticed a young man sitting down by the fountain playing a guitar and singing. Well, there was a young policeman on duty, so he went over to him. He said, "Have you had permission to sing in the street like this?" He said, "No, I'm sorry, I didn't know I had to." Well, the policeman said, "I'm sorry about this," but he said, "You'll have to accompany me." Well, he said, "I'll do my best. What are you going to sing?" Man come to my door recently begging. You don't see it very much now. "Oh," he said, "Missus, I am had nothing to eat for 2 days. Well," I said, "I wish I had your willpower." He went downtown from my house and went in one of the baker's shops. So he said to the girl behind the counter, "Can you help me?" She said, "Better if you help yourself." Oh, he said, "Thank you." He picked up a pasty and a tea treat bun and walked down the street eating them. Now, I had to go Darby and Joan Club as well. I get out as much as I can. And I went home with my friend to tea. Her little granddaughter was there, helping with the tea, brought in a plate of cream cakes. Oh, I thought, I'm going to have one of they in a minute, a lovely big cherry on the top. So I said to her, "You're a good little girl. If you've been here all this afternoon with they cakes, and you ha' met one." "No," she said, "Miss Rosewarne, I ha' met one. I've licked them all, and I give pussy a lick too, but I never eaten them." This woman went by a fur coat. She saw the price, and she nearly had second thought. She wanted this coat. She said, "What'll happen if it get caught in the rain?" So the assistant said, "Well, madam, have you ever seen a squirrel walking round carrying an umbrella?" A few weeks ago, it was a lovely sunny afternoon, so I walked down as far as our park, and I was sitting down, and somehow I felt a bit lonely, and I was shedding a few tears. And a person came on who knew me, and she sat down and she said, "Why are you so upset, dear?" Well, I said, I was feeling a little bit sad because there's no man in my life. Well, to my surprise, she sat down beside me and started to cry too. I said, "Oh, whatever's the matter?" "Well," she said, "Mrs. Rosewarne, you're crying because there's no man in your life, dear, and I'm crying because there's no life in my man." She told me about her sister and her husband who lived in Glasgow, and they'd been invited to a wedding in London. Now the man said, "We shan't be able to go because," he said, "I can't get away from my business. I can't spare the time." But of course the lady had visions of a new outfit and going down, and well, she was some disappointed. So she nagged him a bit like the women do, and he said, "Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. If we can get down and back in one day, fly down, fly back in a day, we'll go." So, of course, Mrs. went down to the airport, and she found out that they could go down in the morning, go to the wedding, and be back in the evening. But he was a bit nervous of flying. So when they got down on the airport, he was finding fault with everything. He didn't think the plane looked very airworthy. Didn't think the engine was sounding right. He didn't think the pilot was old enough to be qualified. Oh, he was in some state. So in the end, the pilot heard him. And he came over and he said, "Now look, my man, I don't like flying with a strained atmosphere on my plane. I like everybody to be happy together. Now he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take you to London free if you'll keep quiet all the way. If I don't hear another sound, you shall travel free. Well, Scotsmen wasn't going to miss an opportunity like that. So they got in the plane, and do you know, this pilot tried everything. He looped the loop, he did the Victory Road, he went in and out of the chimneys. Nothing, this man never made a murmur. Well, when they got to London, the pilot came back and he said, well, my man, I congratulate you. I never dreamt you would have kept quiet through all those manoeuvres. Well, he said, I must say I nearly spoke once. So the pilot said, you did? When was that? He said, when Mrs. fell out. Now, this lady in the park, she was telling me that she'd been to see her great-grandchild, very proud of it. And when she got there, the little baby was being bathed. So she looked in and she said, oh, some handsome baby. What is it, and dear, little boy or little girl? So her granddaughter said, my dear granny, your eyesight's some bad, isn't it? She said, 'Tisn't my eyesight, dear, 'tis my memory. Now, a neighbour of mine have just had a present from America. Oh, he came out to tell me all about it. Oh, he said, I've had a lovely present. A camera, Miss Rosewarne, a beauty. And 'tis some fast. I can even catch my missus with her mouth shut. This lady'd been a widow for a long time, and one day she was going through some papers, and she found a lovely photo of her husband. She thought, well, I believe some of the members of the family would be delighted to have a copy of this photo. So she went down to the photographer and asked him if he could take off some copies, and he said, yes, of course I can. She said, there's only one thing about that photo that I don't like, because my husband very rarely wore a hat. Said, I wonder, could you remove the hat? So he said, oh yes, we can do all sorts now with photography. He said, which side of his head did your husband part his hair? Well, she said, you'll see that for yourself when you take his hat off, won't you? Another dear old couple I had to visit, and he had a very bad cold. And his wife said, now I'm going to get the doctor, she said, because if you were to leave this go on, you'll have bronchitis before you know it. Well, he hated doctors. So he said, well, if you get the doctor, I shan't speak to him. Well, Mother never listened. She rang the doctor, and when he heard the doctor come, he turned over, buried his head in the pillow seat, and he wouldn't look up. And he wasn't looking very well, and he never had his teeth in and all. And this young doctor was in a hurry, so he came in and he looked at him. Oh, he said, Madam, I believe your husband is dead. Well, he thought he'd better move, but this time he said, don't be so silly, I'm not dead at all, I'm all right. So his wife said, now look, lie down and don't argue. The doctor to know more about these things than you do. They invited me to lunch when he got better, and she started to set the table. She took out some square brown-looking things. I'd never seen them before. I said, what are they, in dear? Oh, she said, Mrs. Rosewarne, they're table mats. We'd have our dinner on they. Oh, I said, dear, do you mind if I'd have a plate? I didn't know how to cope with gravy and all. I said, we don't know how the other half of the world will live, do us? Now, as most of you to know, there's always a bit of friendly rivalry between Cameron and Redruth, especially on the rugby field. Now, years ago, when a lot of Cornish men emigrated, 2 Cameron men went South Africa, and they were lodging together. And of course, in those days, letters took a long time, no airmail like there is now. And when they had a letter, they were quite excited. So one day one had one, but not the other. And the other one was watching them read this letter. And he saw his face alter, so he said, you got bad news, Avian boy. He said, bad news, I should think I have. My little sister home in Cameron have been and married a coloured man. Oh, the other one said, my dear life, that is nothing worry about. He said, my sister home in Cameron went and married a Redruth man. Now, talking about Redruth, I was in there a week or two ago, and I met a little couple I know. Oh, they was looking some worried. So I thought, well, they're looking a bit anxious. I'm going to find out what's the matter. Tidn't that you're inquisitive, but you like know, don't you? Well, she said, Mrs. Rosewarne, we are a bit anxious. we're looking for a present for some friends for their golden wedding. Well, 'twas some lucky they met me, because, I'm full of good ideas. So I said to them, have you thought about a little budgie? Well, they hadn't. Now look, I said, what would be better than a golden cage and a little yellow budgie? Well, I left it with them, and I never heard more about it for some time. But when I met her again, she said, we did what you said, Mrs. Rosewarne, and we had the budgie delivered to them on the day of their golden wedding. And a day or two later, she had a note from them, thank you very much for remembering our golden wedding. The little budgie was lovely, but we would just as soon have had a chicken because there wasn't much cut on it. Now, this young husband, he was in work one day and he had an unexpected promotion. Oh, he was delighted. So he thought on his way home to celebrate, he'd buy his wife a nice bunch of flowers. Well, when he got to the door, put the key in the door and opened it, she came out and saw him with these flowers. She burst out crying. He said, what's the matter? Oh, she said, I've had some day. The baby's teeth had been crying all day. I put the potatoes on, burnt them, ruined the saucepan, and now you're come home drunk. I don't know what make about lady drivers. My daughter-in-law started lessons, and the instructor asked her the first time he took her out if she'd read the highway code. She said no, she thought she'd rather wait and see the film. Well, eventually, she passed her test. Oh, I don't know, but she did. And she was out one day and she had trouble with the car. So she drove into a garage. Chap came out and looked at it. He said, Missus, didn't you know your battery was flat when you left home? She said, no, I didn't know what shape he was supposed to be. Then he said, your engine is missing. Well, she said, I know that was there when I left home. Another day, she went back to the garage and she asked for a dipstick. So the man said, well, of course you have one with pleasure. But he said, you only bought one last week. She said, I know, but that's no good. He said, what do you mean it isn't no good? What's wrong with it? Well, she said, it wouldn't reach the oil. I know a lady who got a lovely little antique shop. And she was there last week and a young man came in and he opened a box and he took out 12 beautiful silver snuff boxes. It nearly took her breath away. She hadn't seen so many for a long time. So she was a bit suspicious and she said to him, where did you get them? Oh, he said, my granny gave them to me. So she said, oh, did your granny take snuff then? He said, no, she only took snuff boxes. Her daughter was married recently, and the little couple, they went away on honeymoon by train because they were going right up north. And as they were going along, they passed through a long tunnel. And of course, going through this tunnel, he gave her a kiss and a cuddle, just married, you know. So when they came through the other side, he said, do you know, that tunnel cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to build. So she said, well, 'twas worth it, every penny. Now, like lots of people in the West Country, I did take a few in for bed and breakfast. And a man came in the other night. He said, Missus, can you give us a bed and a bath? Well, I said, I can give you a bed, but I'm afraid you'll have to bath yourselves. I'm not going to start that. But he was a bit fussy, and he said he wanted to see the room. So went upstairs, had a look, put his hand all over the mattress. He said to his wife, my dear life, he said, we shall have lumbago in the morning. So I said, no, you won't, I'm sorry, but you'll have to have bacon and eggs the same as the rest. They were very nice people. Stayed 3 nights. Well, the second morning he came down and he said, Mrs. Rosewarne, I wonder if you would eliminate my egg today. Well, I didn't know what he meant. And I thought, well, I'm not going to no expense. So I fried his egg again and I took it in. And I said, look, I'm sorry. I fried your egg again because my eliminator broke down. The woman was a bit fussy too, really. She said, Mrs. Rosewarne, look, there's a crack on my plate. Well, I went over and looked. I said, my dear, that isn't no crack. That's your piece of bacon. I tell you what, they'd think that we down here in Cornwall are dense. But tidn't we, you know, 'tis they. I read in the paper last week, London have got the densest population in the country. So 'tis no good for them to say no different. I got a friend, she don't like bed and breakfast people, because she said you don't know who you're going to have. So she decided she'd take a lodger. Now she got some dear little boy. He'd never been away from home before. Well, of course, he didn't like to complain about nothing. And you know, the day he turned in, she bought a rabbit. And that boy had rabbit stew, rabbit pasty, rabbit pie, rabbit sandwiches. Oh, he wasn't very well told by the end of the week. And she was a bit worried. So she said, I believe I'd better get the doctor for you, son. He said, Missus, don't worry about no doctor. Go out and see if you can hire a ferret. I was home this morning, bit busy, you know, because I told you I had my son coming to dinner, and I had a visit from one of those Indians that to go around from door to door selling, you know. Well, I always like buy something from them, for the sake of race relations. You've got to be careful about that, you know. As he was showing me what he had in his case, I thought, well, I'll be a bit friendly to him. So I said, you a Muslim, are you, dear? He said, no, lady, me Sikh. I said, well, try not be sick all over my clean doorstep, Wendy, because I scrubbed 'em up this morning. Now, this Methodist minister was out walking one day, and he met a man he hadn't seen in chapel for some time. So he went across to him, and he said, my friend, I haven't seen you in the service lately. No, and he said, I aren't coming no more. Oh, the minister said, I'm sorry about that. Why? He said, 'cause he's too much dry rot up in the pulpit. So the minister looked at him. He said, well, I don't know which is worse, the dry rot in the pulpit or the worms down in the pews. This dear little local preacher, he was a very good preacher, but he was a bit long-winded. And one Sunday morning he preached on the prophets, and he went from one to the other, on and on. Then he said, now, we come to Isaiah. Now let me see, where shall I put Isaiah? And a dear little man in the back said, he can have my seat because I'm going home to have my dinner. Now I believe I told you before I had a Go Darby and Joan Club. Well, we had a handsome speaker up there a week or two ago. He was telling us all about the dangers of alcoholic drink. And he thought he would illustrate it a bit. So he got a glass of water, and he took a tin from his pocket, and out of this tin he took a little ordinary earthworm. And then he took a little bottle from his pocket, and he said, now friends, in this bottle is whiskey, and I'm going to do a little experiment. So first of all he put the worm in the water, and the worm swam around happy as anything. Now he said, I'm going to add the whiskey, and he added the whiskey, and the worm dropped dead at the bottom of the glass. Now he said to us, can any of you tell me the moral of this story? And a dear old lady up in front said, yes, sir, I can. If we've got worms, we must drink whiskey. We had a bazaar in our chapel the other day, and as well as the stalls and the teas and all that, we had a money tree. We asked the children to bring their little purses with money in it, hand it to a lady, and she would put it on the tree. We thought it would be a bit more interesting if we asked them to recite a little text or verse of a hymn or something. So first little boy came up with his bag, handed it over. He said, here you are, missus. The Lord loveth a cheerful giver. Second little boy came up, and he handed over his. He said, here you are, ma'am. More blessed to give than to receive. And then the little third boy came up, and he was word perfect, you know, when he was home. But when he got him in front of all those people, he forgot what he had to say. So he thought for a second, and then he handed over his little bag. He said, here you are, missus. Fools and their money are soon parted. They had a lady singer there that afternoon, and she wasn't really very good, but she thought she was, and she was swaying around a lot on the platform. And she sang before the opening, and then afterwards she sang again. So she got up and she said, well, ladies and gentlemen, for my second solo, I'm going to sing Down in the Forest. And one of the ladies said, well, thank goodness for that, because we were afraid you were going to sing it here. This minister and his wife went out for a meal. It was to celebrate their wedding anniversary. They had their soup. Then, of course, they had the fish. And she noticed that her husband was, fiddling around a bit with the fish, not eating it very well. So she said, is your fish all right, dear? He said, I don't know. This is the peace of God which passeth all understanding. I went out for a meal one night. My son and his wife took us out. And do you know, I sat down, lovely restaurant it was, and a fly dropped right down in my soup. So I called the waiter. I said, look, there's a fly in my soup. Oh, he said, don't worry about that, miss, as he won't drink much. This Methodist minister was preaching his farewell service. And when he went along to the chapel during the week, he looked at the bill outside, and 'twas announced on it that this was going to be his farewell service. And then it said there's going to be a special anthem by the choir, Now Thank We All Our God. Now, he didn't take a very good view of that. My friend's son went out to America. He couldn't get no work home here, and he went out to America and got a job. Well, the letters started coming home. The very first one they had, oh, got a wonderful job, father. Some feather in my cap out here. Went on a week or two longer, another letter. I've got a promotion, father. Only been there a month, got a promotion, got a bigger house. We're delighted we ever come out here. Best day's work we could have done. Another feather in my cap. Bit later on, missus have got a job as well. The children are gone to a better school, and we're going to move houses again. What a feather in our cap. Well, it went on like this for months, and father and mother home in Camborne were delighted, because people are like that when they go to America, you know. You'd think the streets are paved with gold out there, don't they? But the things changed a bit later on. They had a letter one day, and he said, Dear father, we've had to move from our big apartment, and I've had to change my job, and we aren't so well off as we were. We're thinking about coming home, and we're wondering whether you would be kind enough to send us out our fares. So father wrote back, and he said, No, son, I'm not going to send out your fares. The best thing you can all do is fly home, because they've got enough feathers. We've had an awful lot of rain. I was coming home from town one day, and I met a man I know coming up the road, but instead of walking on the pavement, he was walking in the gutter through all the dirty water, and I couldn't understand it. I thought, I believe there's something wrong with that old man. When he came up close to me, I said, You all right, are he? He said, Yes, Miss Rosewarne, how? Well, I said, I was only wondering why in the world you're walking through all that dirty water. Well, he said, to tell you the truth, I've just dropped a piece of toffee. Well, I said, the toffee ain't going to be no good to you now, is it, dear? He said, I know that, Miss Rosewarne, but me teeth are in it. Now, up in Ireland, there was this lovely young man, a very devout Roman Catholic, and he used to go to church 2 or 3 times a week. But he had to travel over very rough ground, and a car was no use to him. So a friend said to him one day, You're doing a lot of walking. Why don't you see about a horse? So he thought about it, and he went along to the stables and told the man what he wanted. Oh, he said, your luck is in today. We got the very thing here for you. We got a horse who's very religious. Well, the chap said, What do we mean? Well, he said, he won't move or do anything without an instruction, a text or something like that. So the man didn't believe it, but he said, Well, tell me. So the chap in the stable, he said, Look, to get him started, you've got to say, Praise the Lord. And to stop him, you've got to say, Hallelujah. Well, the chap could hardly believe it, but he got on the horse, and he wouldn't move. And when he said, Praise the Lord, he started going across the fields, lovely. But he went on and was gaining speed, and he was going over towards the cliff edge. And the chap got a little bit agitated. So he said, Well, I'll have to say this. So he said, Hallelujah. And the horse stopped immediately with one hoof just over the cliff. And the chap was so relieved, took his handkerchief out from his pocket and wiped his brow and said, Praise the Lord. Well, I seem to have been sitting down here chatting some time. Time for me move now, or else it'll be tea time. But do you know, I came across one of Mr. Herbert Lean's books of Cornish stories this morning, and I'm going to read one before I get up. This one is called Home Sweet Home. Good job Christmas to come only once a year, said Mother. Some fuss. And 'fore you can find time to wash your hands, Christmas is all over. Give me that jug of milk, Richard Henry. I must make haste, or this pudding won't be done for next Christmas. And no milk in the jug. Father give 'em to the cat as 'tis Christmas. Well, I got a drop milk, so you won't ha' no milk in your tea, nor father neither. Can't he milk the cat? I've no time to answer questions, said Mother, and she smacked his hand with a great wooden spoon for picking out the currants and eating of them. Father said he'd a dearly love Christmas time, said Richard Henry, and so do I. Well, yes, he would. All he'd do is eat, lie in the armchair and sleep. I'm the one that got all the work to do. Father came in. Hello, Mother. How's the puddings going? They aren't made yet. They're like the elephant's trunk, all behind. Can I help ye? Said Father. Well, you've seen me make them often enough. Thee ought to be able to make them yourself. Well, I'll stir them for ye. Let me see. Don't scat up the bowl, mind, for Father had took off his coat and waistcoat. Go in bed, Harry, said Richard Henry. Wish I was, said Father. Now that's right, said Mother. Everybody must make a wish as they stir. I made some handsome wish, I did. I hope it'll come true. Father opened his mouth to say something and left his pipe fall right down into the bowl. Oh, I'm some glad 'tedn't my new pipe I had give to me for Christmas. I don't want taste pudding for months. No, and we don't want taste bacca when we're eating pudding, said Mother. This table's some rocky, said Father. I'll put something under one of the legs. Well, he got in under, lifted up the table with his back, and over went the bowl. Better fit you never comed in for the night. Bowls scat to sherds, pudding all over the floor. Now the cat is walking in it. If anybody to wish me a happy Christmas, I'll scatten over the head with his spoon. Never mind, said Father, things might be worse. I haven't killed that duck yet, what Aunt Martha give us for Christmas. Shall I bring he in? He'll save he washing up. I don't care what you do. Stand pon your head if you mind how. Can't stand pon my feet, said he, as he slipped his foot and sat down pon the pudding. Oh, I'm some glad I couldn't go out seeing curls night, said Richard Henry. I should have missed all this fun. Now you go out in the coal house and bring in that duck. Don't let him go, mind, said Father. I'm going in next door, said Mother. I can't stand no more. And mind, everything is cleaned up by the time I come in. Good, Navy. Hold tight, mind. He went earty. Looks as if he's going to be the only one our Christmas pudding in this house this year. Shut the door. Can I leave him go now, said Richard Henry. Well, I suppose. You can't hold him all night. All right, here goes. The duck flapped its wings, jumped on a chair, onto the kitchen dresser. Over went all the cups and saucers. The floor was covered with sherds. I'll twist his neck, said Father. You got catching first. Look, he's going upstairs, said Richard Henry. And upstairs that old duck went, and out through the bedroom window. They never saw the duck again from that day to this. Father said he believed he walked back from Cameron to Aunt Martha's down Marazion. It took Father and Richard Henry 2 hours to clean up the mess, and Cameron Ban was outside playing while shepherds watched their flocks by night. Well, now all I've got to do now is hang this tea towel out on the line, and then I'm going to sit down and have a cup of tea. I'd dearly like to do that after I've cleared away the dinner things. And I had a bit of extra work to do today because my son was here to dinner. His wife has gone up Plymouth for the day, and he'd dearly like a bit of home cooking. So I had a tin of soup, and then sardines on toast, and bit tin rice pudding. Oh, he said, Mother, that was lovely. He'd dearly love his food. He wasn't very young, you know, when he got married. He came home to me one day, out of the blue. Oh, he said, Mother, I've now found some handsome little maid. She's 1 in 1,000. Well, when I looked at her, I thought she was 1 in a raffle. But anyhow, she turned out to be a very good wife, and very thoughtful. Now, the first Sunday when they came back from their honeymoon, she said to me, "Mother, you come down and have a meal with us Sunday." So I thought that was lovely. I was sitting down in chapel, and I kept thinking about the lovely hot dinner I was going to have later on. But my dear, some different story when I got there. My son was sitting one side of the table, she was the other. In the middle you could see it was a chicken wrapped up in this bacon foil. Well, when I came in, she started crying. "Mother," she said, "I don't know what time we're going to have dinner today. That fowl been wrapped up in that foil for 2 hours and he isn't warm yet." Poor little soul. I believe her mother was a little bit simple too, because I took her up to Plymouth one day and we was doing some Christmas shopping. Well, I wanted to go one department, she wanted to go another, so I left her down the bottom of the escalator. Now I said, "You go up and do what you want to do, I'll go down in the basement." Well, I went and I was back in about half an hour. She was still stuck up in the same place. Well, I said, "Have you been upstairs, and dear?" She said, "No, I can't." I said, "What do you mean you can't? Afraid of the escalator, Harry?" She said, "No, but read that notice." And when I looked, see, it said dogs must be carried. She said, "I can't go up there because I haven't got a dog." Oh, poor little soul, I was a bit sorry for her, really. She'd a smoke. Oh, my dear, all the way up in the train she was smoking like a chimney. I said to her, "You smoke a bit heavy, don't you, dear?" She said, "Well, tell you the truth, Mrs. Rosewarne, I've read so much about the dangers of smoking that I've decided to give up reading." Oh, my son's musical. He'd love music. Go all round to see concerts, he'd do. Well, he thought he'd like to go in a male voice choir. But like I said, you can't go into a choir unless you have your voice tried a bit. I went along to the conductor of one of our choirs and I said, "Look, would you listen to and sing? Tell me what you think." "Oh," he said, "Mrs. Rosewarne, bring it up." Well, he put my son to sing a hymn. And do you know, before he got to the end of the second verse, that man had the tears running down his face. Oh, I said, he's some moved. So when he finished, I said, "What about it, and do you think he'll ever make a tenor?" He said, "Miss Rosewarne, he'll be lucky if he ever make 30 bob." He never went in the choir. Poor little chap, he wasn't very workish, not even when there was plenty of work going. He used to have one job after another. Had a very nice job once, there for 1 week, and come home and said he had his cards. So I went down to have a word with the foreman. I said, "Look, how is it that my son is out of a job so quick as this?" I said, "He's a steady worker." He said, "My dear Mrs. Rosewarne, talk about steady, he's motionless." Well, I said, "He's some model son." He said, "Well, he had no working model." Anyhow, he was on the dole for a long time. But recently he'd got a nice job brushing the streets. Now, I think that's a very important job, to keep our streets clean. And I believe the boss knew that he wasn't too keen on work. So he had him in and he said, "Now, look here, my son. You got a job here for life if you to look after yourself. But you must keep your mind on your work." And he said, "If people to come up to you in the street and start talking to you, have nothing to do with them. Ignore them. And all you got to do is just keep on brushing." Well, a week later, the man had a telegram. "I've reached Exeter. Please send another brush." He's keen on boxing too. Very keen on boxing. And there was a big boxing match up to Plymouth recently. And he came in, he said, "Mother, I think I'll go." Well, I thought, Plymouth is quite a long way from Camborne. "Oh," he said, "don't matter about that, I'll hitchhike." He's like me, I haven't got no money. So when he got up there, he got a lift on a lorry, got up there, got to the hall. The man said, "I'm sorry, but you won't have a seat here tonight." He said, "These seats have been booked for about 2 weeks. You should have rung up and booked a seat." Well, my son isn't so silly as he'd look. So he thought for a minute, and he said, "Look," he said, "if Prince Philip was coming here tonight, you'd find a seat for he, wouldn't he?" Well, the man said, "Yes, I suppose we would. We'd do our best." "Right," he said, "I'll have his seat, 'cause he ain't coming." Anyhow, he's settled down a bit now, see, married, got 2 children. I'm some proud of they 2 children. The youngest one started down play school. He dearly loved it. And the lady said to him the first morning he went, "Are you the oldest in your family, dear?" He said, "No, Feather's years older than I am." Do you know the oldest boy? He was doing his homework one day, and his mother was out in the kitchen ironing. And all of a sudden he came out to her. He said, "Mother, where did you come from?" "Oh," she said, "the stork brought me." He said, "What about Granny?" "Yes," she said, "stork brought her too." He said, "And me?" "That's right," she said. So he went back to his homework, and he wrote down, "We haven't had a natural birth in our family for 3 generations. I believe he's going to do well. Very keen on geography. When it was his birthday, been a while ago, he said to me, "Granny, if you're going to give me something for my birthday, I should like one of the globes of the world." So you don't see them a lot now, but I went down one of the shops and I got one, brought it home, and on his birthday, oh, he was delighted, my dear, out came this globe. "Now," he said, "Gran, you must ask me a question." Well, I didn't know much about geography, but I thought, well, I got to ask him something, suppose. So I said, "Now look, dear, where's Africa?" "Sure, Granny, where's Africa?" Well, he was looking all over the place. I was afraid of my life he was going to ask me where it was to. And he said, "Well, Granny, I cannot understand it. It can't be very far away, because we got a little African boy in our class, and he'd go home to dinner every day." One day I said to him, "What are you going to be when you grow up, dear?" "Well, Granny," he said, "I don't know." He said, "I thought I'd be a lollipop man." Well, I must say, I thought that was a bit strange for a little boy 11 years old. I said, "How do you think that?" "Well," he said, "they don't start work till they're 65. I don't know whether he's going to be very workish or no." The youngest one, dear little face he got, he went Sunday school for the first time. Teacher said to him, "Now, do you say your prayers every night like a good little boy?" So he said, "No, I don't. My mummy does say them for me." Oh, the teacher was a bit interested, so she said, "What does she say?" He said, "Every night my mummy says, 'Thank God he's in the bed.'" He spent the weekend with me a few weeks ago. My dear life, in the middle of the night I heard him in there crying. I went in, he had toothache. Oh, I was some sorry for him. Well, first thing next morning I sent him down to the dentist's. But my gosh, I had some fright when he came home. Not a tooth left in his head. Of course I went down right away to the dentist. Now, he said, "Mrs. Rosewarne, I'm very sorry about that. But you see, I'm a strong union man. And with me, 'tis one out, all out." I heard him out playing one night with his little brother. They was using awful words. So I went out and I said, "Look, you mustn't use they bad words like that. 'Tisn't right to do it." He said, "Go on, Granny," he said, "don't worry about that. Shakespeare to use them." I said, "He do? Well, I wouldn't play with he no more if I was you. I think it'd make some difference what company they'd keep." I'd always remember before my son was married, he went to a dance, met a nice girl, so he asked her if he could take her home. Well, when they got to her house, she said, "If you promise to be quiet, you can come in and have coffee." So they got to the door, so he said, "Don't worry, I'll be quiet. I won't wake your parents." Oh, she said, "'Tidn't my parents, 'tis my husband." He didn't expect that. Now, it's another cup of tea a minute. I think I shall light the fire. Days are getting a bit cooler. I had a fright this morning. Little woman down the road came up running. She said, "Mrs. Rosewarne, didn't you hear that bang?" I said, "No, dear, I never noticed nothing." She said, "We've had an explosion, a little cottage down the road, nobody hurt. But the man and his wife were blown right through the roof." She said, "It's the first time they two been seen out together for 15 years. Nice little woman she is. One afternoon this summer I was down in her garden sitting down and we were having a cup of tea. And a man come to the woman next door. Well, I couldn't help hearing, I wasn't trying to hear, but I couldn't help hearing, so he said, "Good afternoon, madam. I've come for the payment on your washing machine." She said, "What do you mean, payment on the washing machine?" Well, he said, "You had a washing machine installed a few weeks ago, and your first payment is due." Oh, she said, "I aren't paying nothing on that." You told me that machine would pay for itself in time. She's all right, but I don't believe she can always pay her bills. One day her rent was due, so she said to her little boy, I can see the rent collector coming. When he'd come to the door, you tell him that Mummy's sorry she can't pay the rent today because she's gone out. And said, I lied behind this curtain. So sure enough, the man rang the bell and the little boy went out and did as he was told. Said, Mummy can't pay the rent because she's gone out. So the rent man said, all right, son. He said, tell your mother the next time she'd go out, take her 2 feet with her, because I can see them sticking out under that curtain. She was telling me about old man that she didn't know. He said he'd just been down to see his niece's new baby. So she said to him, oh, what is it then? A little boy or a little girl? Oh, he looked somewhere and he said, I don't know. I forgot to ask. Well, she said, it doesn't matter. He said, well, it do really, don't it? I don't know whether I'm uncle or aunt. I've got a new neighbour. And she said to me one day she was feeling a little bit lonely. She said, I'm feeling a little bit lonely, don't know nobody. Would you come in and have lunch with me? Well, I thought that's grand. Bit company and saving me on eat. So I went, and she'd made a pasty. And it looked lovely and it smelt lovely. But when I bitten, I was some disappointed. He was a wished pasty. No meat in it at all, nothing more than a bit of sinew. The potatoes was gone black. Bit onion, and that was it. Well, I had to eat it because there wasn't anything else there. Well, then she made a cup of sugary tea. So she said to me as I was drinking my tea, you read teacups, do you, Mrs. Rosewarne? Oh, I said, no, dear, I don't have nothing to do with things like that. Oh, she said, I do every day. So she took the cup and she swirled it round like they do. She said, well, this is very interesting. I've got somebody coming to see me today I haven't seen for a long time. Well, I said, dear, perhaps 'tis your butcher, 'cause by the look of that pasty you haven't seen he for a bit of while. But I got another friend. Oh, she'd make a real handsome pasty. I'd go spend the day with she, 'cause she'd live out in the country. And we were sitting down having a cup of coffee when I got off the bus. And she said to her husband, when you finished your coffee, go on out and bring in a turnip. Well, 'twas an old drizzly day and he didn't want to go very badly. So he said, oh, what size turnip do we want? So she said, well, I don't know. Bring in one size of your head. Well, a few minutes later, the postman came. He said, Mrs., is your husband all right? Well, she said, I suppose so. He was a few minutes ago, eh? He said, I don't know. He's going up and down the rows of turnips in your garden. He's trying his hat on every one. Now, another friend and her husband bought an isolated cottage out in the country. They don't see nobody hardly. But one day last week, one of these high-pressure salesmen called on her. And as she opened the door to him, before she could say a word, he emptied a plastic bag of dirt in on her little hall carpet. Looked as if it had come from a vacuum cleaner. No, she looked quite frightened. He said, Madam, don't be alarmed. I've got a machine here that'll remove every speck of that dirt. And he said, if it don't, I'll eat the dirt. She said, well, hang on a minute and I'll go in and get a spoon, because we aren't connected to the electricity here. I was out shopping this morning. I really wanted to get a coat. And I met this little woman and I thought, well, perhaps she would go with me. I like to have somebody else's opinion when I'm buying a coat. So she said, yes, I will, Miss Rosewarne. She said, I'm glad to see you anyway, because I wanted to tell you my little granddaughter is courting. I thought, well, she's some lucky, because she had no oil painting. So I said, oh, I'm glad for that. And dear, got a nice little chap, have she? She said, my dear Mrs. Rosewarne, he had the wet look before that new rainwear was ever invented. I noticed she was wearing a rather pretty locket. So I said to her, that's a lovely little locket you're wearing, dear. New, is it? Yes, she said, I had it from America. So I said, is there anything in it then? Yes, Miss Rosewarne, a lock of my dear husband's hair. Oh, I said, I didn't know he was gone. She said, no, he haven't, dear, but his hair have. She told me they were selling cracked eggs in a shop. She said, my dear Miss Rosewarne, 5p a dozen cheaper. So I went down and I said, can I have a couple of dozen of they eggs, and dear? Oh, the girl said, I'm sorry, Miss Rosewarne, but they're all gone. Well, I said, I aren't no hurry. Won't take ye long crack few more, will it? Now, I to go WI. I'm very fond of the WI. Recently, I went to a county meeting, and two ladies met there. Hadn't seen each other for some time. So one said to the other, how did you get here? Did your husband bring you? Oh, no, she said. My husband is on safari. He's going through Africa with his camera. Did your husband bring you? No, the other lady said. My husband is going through China with a dishcloth. I was in the town last week, and I saw this man. He turned out to be a Scotsman, and he had a bottle of whisky, and he was putting it in his hip pocket. And as he went across the road, he collided with a woman with a shopping trolley, and he fell down right on the side of this whisky. So he put his hand down, and he found his leg was saturated, and he said, oh, dear Lord, I do hope that 'tis blood. Poor man. Scotsman wouldn't want to lose all that whisky. Now, very often I'd go up doctor's surgery, especially winter time, because you're saving fire and light home, and you're always meeting somebody up there you can have a bit of chat with. Now, I went in last week, so I said, Doctor, I got some sore throat. I believe I got laryngitis. He said, well, why aren't you whispering? Well, I said, didn't no secret. I don't understand these young doctors. And I said, now look here a minute, now I'm here, I'm not going to be rushed. I'm having a lot of trouble with this knee. Especially going upstairs. I said, my dear, 'tis murder. Now look, he said, Mrs. Rosewarne, I can't do nothing about that, dear. That's rheumatism, and it to come with old age, and you'll have to put up with it. I said, that's funny, you know, because this knee is the same age as that one, and yet this one don't ache. Another day I went up there. I had a bit of rash on my arm. 'Twasn't a lot, but I thought, well, better see about it. So I showed it to him, and he looked quite worried. Put a great magnifying glass on it. Then he went over and took a book down from the shelf and went through this book. Then he came back to me again with this great glass. He was looking really puzzled. He said, Miss Rosewarne, have you ever had this before? Well, I said, yes, I have, Doctor. He said, well, you got it again. It wasn't really very satisfactory, was it? I had to go chapel, of course, and I love harvest festivals. And there's a farmer down in the village, and he had a marvellous crop of apples this year. So he said to his wife one day, now look, he said, the Lord have blessed us, and all the apples on that side of the orchard I'm going to give to the church for the harvest festival. Well, a day or two later he was some disappointed. He came down and boys had got in and taken all the apples. Well, he wasn't going to be beat. He said, no, I'll give the Lord the apples on the other side of the orchard. So he put up a notice. Please do not touch these apples. I am saving them for the church harvest festival. So when he came down the next morning, they'd been all stolen too. And underneath his note they wrote, all is safely gathered in. Now, he had a son, and he wanted for this son to get on a bit better than he'd done, so he sent him to an agricultural college. And do you know, boy come home for half term, well, he knew more than father, knew the lot. He was going swaggering around this farm place, and he said to his father, well, your fruit trees are looking in some bad state, father. He said, you'll be lucky if you get any apples at all from they trees up in the corner. Father said, lucky. It'd be a miracle, because he said they're pear trees. It has seemed to me that farming is appealing a lot to these city boys now. I believe they'd think there's a bit of glamour attached to it or something, but it is real hard work, really, I reckon. Anyway, this boy from Birmingham was sent down to do some practical work on a farm in Cornwall. And he didn't know really very much about it at all, so he went to live with this farmer who was very nice and kind to him. And the first morning he was there, he put him to manure a patch of ground. Well, of course, the boy wanted to do the right thing, so he didn't use very much manure. So when Farmer came out, he said, "Oh, my dear boy, these are put more than that there. I'm going to put taters in this ground." And he said, "There's some hungry things." Well, the boy didn't quite understand what he meant, but he did what he said and put on more manure. And about 1 o'clock, Farmer's wife came out and said, "Now come on in, dear, wash your hands and have your dinner." Well, there was a lovely pasty on the plate, and she told him how to eat it, wrap it up in his serviette and eat it in his hand. So he took a bite or two, and he looked at her. He said, "Do you know, I know now what Master meant when he said that taters are hungry things." She said, "You do?" "Yes, 'cause he said they'd been here and ate all the meat in this pasty." Another little man had a small old un, dearly loved his animals, but he retired and bought a little cottage in Camborne. But he had a nice big garden. So he said to his wife, "You know, I got a good mind to keep a donkey, 'cause he'll be a bit of company for me, and I shall have a bit something to do." Well, with petrol going up so dear and that, the people down there that grow vegetables and flowers and all asked him would he do a few deliverers for them. So he got a little cart, and the donkey and cart used to go around, and he made quite a nice bit of pocket money. Well, one day he had an order to deliver flowers for a wedding, and of course he wanted everything to be exactly. So he went out the night before, and he found the donkey was poorly. Oh, he was in some state, so he went in and rang the vet. Well, the vet came. Now he said, "Nothing worry about. You've been working this donkey a bit too much." But he said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll leave you 2 tablets, and if you'll give him 1 tonight and 1 tomorrow morning, he'll be all right." Well, the poor man was a bit dubious, but he gave him his tablet and went to bed. Early the next morning he got out, opened the stable door. My dear, that donkey was gone across the fields. You couldn't see him for dust. He said, "Mother, what are we going to do? The donkey's gone." She said, "Take that other tablet and see if you can catch him." Now, there was a little farmer's daughter. She got engaged to a boy who worked in a bank. At Plymouth, I believe it was. Didn't know nothing about farming at all. Now, she had a lovely home and she dearly loved her family. But when this boyfriend's people were coming down for the first time to tea, she was a little bit worried. So she said to her mother, "I hope everything's going to be all right. They don't know nothing about the country." She said, "For instance, I wish we could do something about father." So mother said, "What do you mean?" Well, she said, "He's so Cornish. They'll never understand what he's saying." And she said, "Another thing, he's always talking about manure. I wonder, Mother, could you get him to say fertilizer?" So Mother said, "Well, I'll try." But she said it'd have took me 15 years to get him to say manure. I do a lot of reading. I'd go up library 2 or 3 days a week sometimes. And I've been waiting for a book up there. Well, I went in today, and the librarian said to me, "Oh, Mrs. Rosewarne, I'm glad to see you, dear. That book you've been waiting for is here." So she gave it to me, and when I looked at it, it looked as if somebody had dropped a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or something on it. So I thought, oh, well, don't matter. But as she was booking it out to me, I said, "Bit dirty, isn't it, dear?" Well, she said, "I don't know, Miss Rosewarne, I haven't read it." Well, then I went on to the shoe shop. I took a pair of shoes in to be repaired. So I said to the man, "Can he do anything to these for me, dear?" He said, "Lilla Miller, Miss Rosewarne, we'll burn them." 'Twas raining by this time, so I decided I believe I'll go on by bus. And of course the bus was packed, and I had a lot of shopping with me, dripping umbrella, and you know how big I am. Anyhow, the only empty seat was by a very little man. So I thought, well, I'm going to sit down. So I plunked down beside him, shook him up a bit. He didn't like it. So he turned round to me and he said, "It's a pity these buses don't charge passengers according to their size." Well, I said if they did, they wouldn't bother to stop to pick you up. Do you know, I was going to Penzance on the bus the other day, and I noticed that every so often the bus would stop and the driver would get out and go into the telephone box. And I thought, well, this is some funny. He must have somebody home ill, I should think. Well, after 3 or 4 times, I couldn't keep quiet no longer. So I said to him, "Is everything all right home, dear?" He said, "Yes, madam, why?" So I said, "Well, I can't help noticing that on the way down you've got out 3 or 4 times to get into the telephone box." "Oh, no," he said, "there ain't nothing wrong. But I got to check with the depot every so often to see if the fares have gone up since I left this morning." So it wasn't nothing wrong with his family. I don't know what you'd all think about the common market, but I know a woman who went to France for a few days this year, and you'd think she'd been out there for years. She's given her husband slugs and snails. Well, he isn't looking very well at all to me. And while she was out there, she learnt a few French phrases. And of course, when she got back Cameron, she never had nobody try them on. But one day last week, the coal man come, and she thought, "I believe I'll see whether he can understand this." So he came in, he said, "How much coal do we want, day and missus?" She said, 500 weight, s'il vous plaît." He said, "What's that then?" "Oh," she said, "you Cornish people are so ignorant. We're in the common market now, and we should be using their phrases and their recipes." So he didn't say nothing, but he went out and brought in the first 100 of coal. He said, "Missus, how do you want this coal? A la carte or cul-de-sac?" Her teenage son went France with her, and he come home just as silly as she. He took his little girlfriend out one day, give her a spray of flowers, and pulled the chair out for her to sit down for her meal. Oh, she was quite overcome, so she turned round to him and she said, "My gracious," she said, "you're a proper Don Juan now, aren't you?" So he said, "I don't want to embarrass you, but it is not Don Juan. It is pronounced Don Juan." Well, she didn't say anything, went on eating her meal. So after a bit of while, he said to her, "When did you have your holiday this year?" Now, she wasn't going to be caught out again. So she said, "I had the last week in Oon and the first week in July."